Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight here at the American Heritage Center. My name is Brie Blasi. I'm the Public History Educator here at the HC, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this special event featuring lawyer, journalist, historian, and author Phil White. Tonight, we have the privilege of hearing from a writer whose work has shed light on a powerful and often overlooked history, the experiences of Black students at the University of Wyoming. Phil White's journey with this topic began more than 50 years ago when, as editor of the Branding Iron, he covered the events surrounding the Black 14, who were 14 Black UW football players dismissed from the team for peacefully protesting racial injustice. That moment and the broader fight for civil rights left a lasting impression on him, shaping his career as a journalist and historian. His latest book, Trials and Triumphs, Black Americans at the University of Wyoming, goes beyond the Black 14 to tell a much deeper story. Through decades of research and personal interviews, White has uncovered the stories of resilience, activism, and achievement that has shaped UW's history. His work also brought to light the identity of UW's first known Black graduate, Bonnie Mae Fermon, who earned her zoology degree in 1947, and Phil will tell you much more about her. If you haven't already gotten your copy, Phil will be selling his books and signing them over on the side of the room here when he's done. And I will tell you that Phil also used to be my neighbor, so I know from experience that he is very generous with his time and his knowledge. So I'm sure he'd be happy to chat with you as well if you have further questions after we're done. We're very proud to say that also that Phil conducted some of his research for both of his books here at the AHC. And we're very happy to be hosting him to share some of these important stories that he's uncovered. So please join me in welcoming Phil White.
Well, I'd like to thank Brie and Mary Beth and Paul and Leslie for inviting me to appear. I was asked, after I agreed to do this, I was asked to send in a photo that they could use in their leaflet. And so I looked and I finally found one. There we go. I don't know what was wrong with it, but they didn't think that would work. So I had to come up with another one. I'm excited to see so many people here. I wanted to, for the students in the audience, I wanted to pass along the advice that an old lawyer in Cheyenne once told me when he went off to Michigan as a freshman. He was having trouble filling out his class schedule, so he asked an upperclassman, how to go about this, and the upperclassman said, "Well, I always schedule all of my classes in the morning, so when I get up at noon, I'm done for the day." So probably not a recipe for success. Well, I have a lot of people to introduce. I didn't expect so many. One of the chapters in my book is about Karen Brooks Lyons, who has been principal of Henderson Elementary School in Cheyenne for a long time. And her mother came to UW at about the same time and also became a teacher. Karen, could you raise your hand? And she brought along 3 of her college friends who still live in Cheyenne and hosted her. Where's AJ? Oh, there he is. Okay, AJ Johnson has a chapter in my book. AJ came to UW on a basketball scholarship in 1979. And in the first game of the season, he had a real tough matchup with Mississippi Valley State, which Wyoming won by a score of 121 to 62. And AJ is sure that he had 20 or 25 assists in this game because he just remembers countless times where he threw the ball forward to one of the tall guys who did a dunk, you know. But at that time, they were not keeping track of assists as an official statistic. So when you look in the Cowboy basketball record book today, the leader had 15 assists. And AJ, after college, became a campus policeman for 25 years or so. So a lot of people in Laramie know him. I gotta get that picture of there. Oh, here's another picture I thought was interesting. I went up on the roof and got this picture, and that's my neighbors, Phil and Denzel and Sarah Heisinger here. That's their roof. In 2012, unidentified flying objects. Uh-oh. It's a closer. And it just, oh, I know many of you may have come to hear about the Black 14, but there's a lot about that in my first book. So I'll just mention a few things about it. I wanted to show this picture of the Confederate flag flying over Memorial Stadium the next day after the Black 14 were kicked off. And I was I was still the editor of the Branding Iron, so I sort of had to be impartial, but I was with the protesters that were at this BYU game. And as we went into the stadium, they confiscated all of our signs. So when I saw that up there at the top of the stadium, I went to the policeman down there and I said, what about that guy at the top of the stadium with that flag? He said, free speech. Who else? Oh, Jenny Parker right here. Jenny was one of the protesters that day. Her husband was a professor of lithiology, limnology, yeah, freshwater zoology. Pardon? Oh. And Jenny, you worked at the county clerk, I know, for a long time.
That was way later.
That was later. Were you at the UW?
I was working for business and economic research.
Okay. Business and economic research for a long time. Jenny's 2 blocks away from me. We should introduce Leslie Wagoner. She had 2 really good articles from the AHC. Leslie. 2 really good articles on the Ku Klux Klan in Wyoming in the 20s in a recent issue of Annals of Wyoming. By the way, I have a bibliography around somewhere that has a lot of the sites. Okay. Oh, Milton Ontiveros is from the UW News Department. Anybody else in the Jim Petty is the one person that keeps, if any of you get antenna TV, there's 3 channels on it that you can get on antenna TV. We're solely due to Jim Petty. Anybody else in my book I haven't introduced? I want to introduce Amelia, our Holdu, who is in the botany department, and she has created an exhibit at the Wyoming State Museum in Cheyenne called Frontier Faith, the Legacy of Lucinda Phillips, Allen Chapel, the Union Pacific Railroad, and Camellia Moses Hodu. So, would you explain what that's all about?
Wow, you never give a professor a microphone, that's the first thing. I know that my friend from Cheyenne is here, hi. I thought that was you. So, those of you who don't know me, I came here in 2021 as the Dean for the College of Arts and Science. And a funny thing happened to me on the way to Wyoming. My very first day, July 5th, 2021, the provost told me I no longer had a job. So I had to regroup, and it was through Allen Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church that kept me. I grew up in that faith, and I couldn't for the world think, how did an AME church get way to Wyoming? It's normally an East Coast phenomenon. So I started doing research, and I found that a former slave named Lucinda Phillips, who came from Kentucky, actually brought the church here and was instrumental in establishing that church, which is still in existence. It's 145 years old, older than the state. And I came from Louisiana here. And the significance of that was that I was at Xavier University of Louisiana, the nation's only Black and Catholic higher education institution. It was started by one of the richest women in America, Catherine Drexel. However, in Louisiana, she was not allowed to buy property. So I kept thinking, how did a former slave woman come to Wyoming and was able to leave a legacy of a church that still existed? And I was like, this is a story that more people need to know.
Yes.
But I also wanted to make sure that resilience, perseverance, because that first day, I mean, you can imagine giving up a job and then coming here and somebody telling you, oh, by the way, you lose your job. But I stood on my faith. And I think that's important for people to understand that, you know, I often believe that God won't bring you to something, he won't bring you through it. So, and people say, why do you still stay in, AJ? Why do you still stay in Wyoming? Because I have felt at home here. I have not felt other, which is really interesting, knowing the legacy of our institution. We have come a long way to make people feel welcome. Had I landed in a situation where the institution would not have welcomed me, I would have left as I had other opportunities. But I'm here now doing research. I'm a data fellow, doing research on and weed that you guys have problems with everywhere else in the world. It's considered a plant that we like, but a leafy spurge is not a plant that is liked out here in the West. And I actually have expertise in that area. So the exhibit that's started on February 1st and will go to April 30th. I hope you'll come and look at it and give me your feedback. It tells the story of how that church got here. And it also tells my story, how faith has sustained me. Thank you, Phil. I didn't expect for you to give me talking.
In over Christmas break in the 67-68 school year, some of the Black folks at the university who were in Laramie over Christmas break, they met at Alberta and William Johnson's house for lunch, and they formed the Black Student Alliance. And one of the Black students who attended that was Ed Pollard. He came from Brooklyn Tech High School in 1965, played for the Cowboys basketball. And he later went on to be, he was one of the protesters, of course, at the stadium. He went on to become actually a Western Athletic Conference referee for a few years, and then held various positions in athletic departments around the country. Anyway, his wife wife, Laura Pollard, is at the table back there in the blue. And my cousin Pete Moran, who's a professor of education. He got his PhD at Kansas State, and he wrote a thesis on, and it then became a book on the history of busing to achieve integration in Kansas City, which basically resulted in all the white people moving to the outskirts and the black people taking over the center of the city. So at the end of the busing, they were pretty much as segregated as they were to start with. But is that right, Pete?
That's pretty accurate.
Okay. Now, what was I going to talk about? Okay, I was going to talk first about a basketball player in Wyoming named Curtis Jimerson, because he may be in the news this weekend. He's going to be in Laramie if all goes well. Oh, great. He's on the Zoom. Hello, Kurt and Linda, out in Danville, California. Curtis grew up in El Paso. He and one or two of his siblings were the first black students at the white high school. And he was a good enough basketball player that he got an offer from Texas Western. Now it's UTEP. But they told him that since he had a family and a home in El Paso, they wanted him to stay at home. And he said, wait a minute, I've got 9 brothers and sisters. I need to get a place where I can study. I want to be in the dorm. Well, they refused. So he wound up choosing to go to CU because he loved the campus when he visited. So they asked him to go to Pueblo Junior College first. So he did that. He became a junior college All-American. And he often went into his coach's office to study. And one time he was in there and he sees on his coach's desk a letter from the coach of CU, Sox Walseth. And it said that when Curtis comes here, we're not going to be able to start him because we already have a black starter. So he's going to have to sit on the bench for a while. So when Curtis had visited the UW campus, it was very bad weather, like yesterday. And so he said, gosh, I'm never coming here. And after he read that letter, he decided the weather might be a lot better in Laramie. So he comes to Wyoming in the fall of 1960, along with another black junior college transfer named Ron Bostic from Saratoga Springs, New York. And so they became roommates immediately. And after the first year, Ron Bostic was called into either the coach's office or the athletic director's office. And he was told, if you want to keep your scholarship for next year, you have to stop dating that white girl from Iowa. And he learned a couple days later that the white girl was called into the Dean of Women's office, told the same thing. So after that first year, he left. And it occurred to me just the other day that when that happened in 61, the act or the law that made interracial marriage a felony was still in effect in Wyoming. So I don't know if that had any effect on that. Curtis came back for his second year and was named all-conference WAC, first team. So after that, he went back home. He graduated in 63. He went back home. His father told him that he had read that the Robert F. Kennedy Sr. was encouraging J. Edgar Hoover to get more blacks involved in the FBI. So his father told him to go down there and apply. So he did, and he got to be a clerk for a while, just in time to see a bulletin come over the wire that Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s brother had just been killed in Dallas. And the orders were close the border. They hadn't found the perpetrator yet. Close the border. And so he thought, wow, this sounds pretty important. But he had to take it to 2 or 3 of the busy FBI agents there before somebody realized what was going on. And then he was going to get drafted. So he went into the Army for a couple of years, and then he came back and became one of the first black FBI agents. So, let's see. And during that year, these are some articles about their games, but this one is particularly interesting. The coach of the Laramie High School basketball team sent all his players to the eye doctor because a week prior, Curtis Jimerson had worn glasses for the first time in a basketball game and scored 34 points. Here is Kurt among the who's who in colleges and universities. And this is Kurt and Ron Bostic. Just a matter of interest, this is Fred Gish from Cheyenne, who was a great player for Wyoming. And this is Curtis down here. Bobby Hansen was from north of Cheyenne, I think. And Ken Rocklitz was from Cheyenne. Here he is. He was from Hillsdale, I think, or something like that. Here is Kurt Jimerson being nominated by Delta 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 and Knight Hall to be Wyo King. And he was elected over a bunch of some fellow athletes and a bunch of other people from the north for the tournament. So that was quite an accomplishment. He said at one time that if there was a dance involved, he didn't go because he couldn't dance with anybody. He was one of two black students on campus other than Bostic. My wife says I have 5 minutes left before, if I was gonna leave 30 minutes for questions, but I barely got into my talk and I'll tell you a little bit about, and then we'll take a vote whether you want to hear more. So while I was researching my first book and the Black 14 and getting in touch with them, I ran across this article in 1996 from the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education. They had sent a letter to all 50 state public universities, flagship universities, asking, who is your first black graduate? Send us a bio and some pictures. Well, about 44 states responded, including Idaho, which had this woman right here, Jenny Eva Hughes, graduated in 1899. But South Dakota, Utah, Wyoming, we don't know who this is. So this article also says that the first, the first black woman to graduate from a college was Oberlin College in Ohio. And yet, well, we probably aren't even going to get far enough to hear about Oberlin again. The first Black graduate from Wyoming, Bonnie Mae Fermon, 1947, went to Oberlin and got a master's degree there. And then she went and worked on a doctorate on zoology at the University of Wisconsin. Then she got married and had 5 kids. So the first Black woman to attend UW was Carrie Burton, who was actually born in Laramie in 1888 and grew up in Laramie. And when she got to be about 14 or 15 in the public school, that's all the further it went. But they did allow the high school age students to take preparatory classes and regular classes at the university. So she went to UW, studied stenography and music. And then at the urging of the Haven Nelson, the famous UW botanist and president, she was encouraged to go to Howard University in DC. And anyway, she's in the Laramie newspapers all the time, playing the piano or just in groups. And often in these stories, they also mention the Rohn family, R-H-O-N-E. One of them was Robert Rohn, who moved to Cheyenne and became the father of Harriet Elizabeth Rohn Byrd, who became the first Black legislator in the state of Wyoming. But her family was in Laramie for quite a while. Here she is pictured with the music students on the steps of Old Main in 1904 when she was like 16. And then she got hired as the stenographer for the university. And here she is at the office of the chemist with T.E. Hepner, Ross Modden, and then colored Carrie Burton. She was working for the judge. She had a birthday party, and here's a couple of Rohns named in there, giving a public recital. And she came back in 1960 for the 50th reunion of her class.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Huh?
In fact,
Am I doing that? Oh.
Very bad.
Oh, okay. This is, by that time, she graduated from Howard, got married to an educator in Maryland. They moved in,
look like Johnny Mama,
and
mother's mother. Is it on?
Sorry, Bill.
Sorry.
On the side there, you should be able to just hit mute all.
Where's my mute ball here?
anyway, in New York, there was a newspaper called the New York Age. It was a Black newspaper. And she's in that paper all the time, playing piano on radio stations and at all kinds of musical events. Also, she was very involved in the NAACP. She returned to Howard one time for a reunion, and she was involved in the Howard alumni group. So they lived in New York the rest of their lives, and she died, I don't know, I can't remember when it was, but her papers are at Wayne State University in Detroit. So the next Black student at UW was an athlete from Casper named Taft Harris, who came to UW in the early 30s, played basketball and football and track. And UW tells me he didn't graduate, but he then lived most of the rest of his life in Casper. And so when Jimerson and Bostic came, they were like almost 30 years later, they were the next Black students at UW. Taft Harris, when he came down to the first state tournament, well, in high school, his coach revealed a couple days later, he had been given a threatening letter about 15 minutes before the first game, which the coach said, he was considerably upset and the threat tended to affect his playing. And so they were trying to find out who had given this letter. Here he is with the freshman team at UW in the half-acre gym, which is run by my cousin Pete Moran's brother. And here he is with the basketball team after they beat BYU to win the conference championships. Again, that's in the half-acre. So, and this will be the last person, then we'll take questions. This is Bonnie Mae Fermon, the first Black graduate from the University of Wyoming. This is the, I think it's the 19, see if she's listed, Bonnie. She's 15 years old, so this would have been, she's born in 25, so this would be the 1940 census, and here are all the Fermons. Benjamin was a stationary engineer in the coal mine, and two of his sons also were laborers in the coal mine. This is Bonnie at UW in one of the groups she was in. She was on the honor roll a few times. This is a quill club of writers. She was in that the yearbooks twice with the queer quill club. This is from the American Heritage Center. They actually have a lot of the older transcripts from the registrar's office upstairs. So this was her transcript, and there's a lot of ones on there in zoology, chemistry, etc. Here's the pre-med honorary and the senior yearbook. Quill club again. And then she got her degree in 1947, along with Tino Roncalio, from also from Rock Springs, who became, served 3 or 4 terms as Wyoming's congressman. Tino had been involved with D-Day in the Army during the war, so he was 4 or 5 years older. And in her last year, she wrote a couple letters to the editor explaining how difficult her time had been, being most of the time the only Black student on campus. And oh, this is now a letter to the editor she wrote to Oberlin. Thought I had another letter in here. She said she was treated, not this, this is when she gets to Wisconsin. But she did say in this other letter that she was treated as if she were an ignoramus most of the time, and it made it very difficult for her. She couldn't get employment and so forth. When she got to Wisconsin, she wrote this card to a Professor Lederman, because she'd seen a flyer that he needed a lab assistant. He says at the bottom, "I'm colored. Seemingly, this has made me ineligible for many jobs I have sought thus far this summer." Lederman wrote back and said that he had actually told the employment office to take that down because the position had been filled. But he said that if she felt like she had a cause, she could go to the faculty civil rights committee, and he told her how to do that. We do not practice discrimination in the laboratory. Joshua Lederberg, 6 years later, won the Nobel Prize, by the way. And this is Bonnie when she later went to the University of Nebraska. And this is a photo of her when she was there. She was in cytology, and I think had only her oral defense of her thesis to go when she died. So it's uncertain whether she ever actually got her degree. She died in 1977 in Madison, and I've talked a couple of times now with her son who lives in Madison. And I discovered recently he writes letters to the editor also. This is the first Black man to graduate from Wyoming. Theodore Jefferson from Tennessee. And he graduated from law school in 1956. Took the bar, passed, was admitted to the Wyoming bar. But then I think he took off to Canada or some other state. By Alice Stevens, that's the source of the Alice Hardy Stevens Center downtown. Anyway, she wrote this article about a panel or something, and she quotes Ted Jefferson there in the yellow. He said he had a terrible time finding an apartment to rent. He went to numerous apartments, and that was so frustrating that the next year his wife went back home. And so he was alone for that year. But at one point he went with his Potter Law Club fellows to the Connor Hotel bar. He went in there, and the owner's husband, they lived in Florida. He happened to be there, and he told the staff not to serve Ted Jefferson. So everybody got up, all his friends, and he got up and left. But this came to the attention of the editor of the Branding Iron, and you know, they're tend to stir up trouble. So he wrote this long article. He did a survey of the bars, the restaurants, the barber shops, and you know, a large percentage of them didn't serve blacks. So that was in 1956, Foxborough. And he wrote a column blasting them. There he is. He was admitted to the bar with Richard Van Thomas, who became a Wyoming Supreme Court judge. Here is James Isaac in first grade at Hannah Schools. See him in the back? He was one of the Black 14. He grew up in Hannah. Here he is on the junior high football team wearing a Wyoming Major shirt. He was a tremendous high school player in all 3 or 4 sports. This is a game at Medicine Bow. He scored 26 points. The top scorer for Mountain View was Hopkinson. Who wants to tell me who Hopkinson was? Well, right. He's the last person to be executed in the state of Wyoming. But he had a scholarship to Arizona State and somehow got into it with some very bad people. And he was soon in federal court on other charges, came back to Wyoming, and he was so upset with the water district over there in Mountain View that he arranged, while he was in prison, to have some of his friends blow up this guy's house, the attorney's house. And they thought that the family had gone to Laramie for the shrine game. So there was nobody there. Well, it turns out they had come right back and they were asleep in the house. So they were all killed. Eleanor Stepp, here she is in Whitehall. She was, her predecessors had homesteaded from the east, from Tennessee or somewhere, and homesteaded up on the Green River a long time before. And so they gradually increased their ranch. They were well-known ranchers up there. She only stayed 1 year, but she went back up there when she got married. She was Johnston, and she made it into this book in 1995 about cowgirls in the West. This book's in the co-library. And there she is pictured in the book. And this is about her. Both of her parents were slaves. This is Sammy Miller. I'm sure AJ knows Sammy Miller. He was a good athlete for Laramie High and then was at UW this year. And this gal was from Cordelia Johns from Rollins. She was a nursing graduate. And she was at UW when Curtis Jimerson was. This is a terrible tragedy that happened in the what's now McWhinney Hall, where Pete's office is. And this is while Jimerson was a proctor in the dorm. Mike Walker, who was a running back for the football team from Detroit, had gone home for Christmas, came back, he had gotten a gun, 22, for Christmas. Came back, moved in, went out rabbit hunting. Then he came back, went to his good friends. By that time, Dave Marion and his brother Jerry Marion were also on football scholarship from Bakersfield. The three of them were very good friends. And he went in there and the Marions were a little concerned. So he pulled the clip out to show them it was okay. Unfortunately, then there was a bullet in the chamber. And somehow or other, pulled the trigger and shot Dave Marion right in the throat, which rendered him a quadriplegic for the rest of his life. And the state of Wyoming then raised $50,000 to enable the Marion family in Bakersfield to build a wing on their house that was handicap accessible. But he never did too well after that, and he died 10 years later. This is Jerry Marion. I think that's Randy Murphy from Casper. This guy, does anybody know? This is when he died in 72. And this, I believe, is Mike Walker's little obituary down in Gilbert, Arizona. Dave Marion's father came from San Bernardino, of course, immediately. Went and talked to his brother, his son, who was in the hospital in Cheyenne, DePaul Hospital. Then he went on a special trip to Laramie, talked to Mike Walker, and he begged and pleaded with him to continue his education. But Mike Walker couldn't handle it and left soon after that. This is Jerry Marion. He organized with 3 track athletes a quartet called the, what do they call it? Can't remember. Anyway, they went to Denver and actually recorded a record. Then they came back and they were featured. This is a picture from the branding iron. They were pictured, and this would have been in 1964, maybe in April. And in this article, well, this fellow here, I think, I'll show you. Charlie Thomas. When I took this picture, he was still #1 in the long jump on the track record book. Well, one of them is quoted in this article as saying, you know, the Beatles had just appeared on the Ed Sullivan in January '64. So in this article, it says, now that all the fuss about the Beatles has died away, maybe our group will have a chance. That's Jerry Marion. He also played baseball. He was the best hitter. Erland Diesel was one of the first Black players on the football team. Dave Hampton played for the Green Bay Packers. Anybody know who this is from Cheyenne? This is Pat Cozy. When I became editor of the Branding Iron, I asked the city or the society editor whether she wouldn't write or get a Black student to be the model for the weekly society page. And I don't know whether I gave her the name or whether she found it, but I'm sure this is the first Black model in the Branding Iron. And Pat Cozy grew up at the Harriman exit or Granite Canyon, west of Cheyenne. And so there wasn't much to do out there. So she and her sisters took up spelling. She was a state champion in the spelling, and one of her sisters was later the state champion in spelling. And she was a teacher in Texas for a long time, and I think she's back in Cheyenne. That'd be right? Okay, well, here's a quick fact about the Black 14. It happened on Friday morning, October 17, 1969. At the same time, at East Lansing, Michigan, Michigan State trustees named Clifford Wharton Jr. as the first Black president of a major American, mostly white university. How's that for a irony? It could have happened at the very same time. And I wanted to mention Alberta Johnson. She was the one who hosted the meeting where the Black Student Alliance was formed. She and her husband moved to Cheyenne after that, and she was elected to the city council. I think she was the first Black woman to be elected to anything in Wyoming history. And yet, there's nothing commemorating that in Cheyenne. So that should be done. I mean, there should be a statue of her. And I guess let me see. This is Pat Cozy. This is Earl Lee of the Black 14. This is Mel Hamilton of the Black 14. This is Gene Huey, who led Wyoming to 3 consecutive conference championships the previous 3 years. And then he came back to finish his degree. And James Tyler and his brother Robert Tyler from Cheyenne. And one of these is RBM. What was his last name? Can't think of it. He was a sprinter for the track team. This is John Weidman, the first Black tenure track professor at the University of Wyoming. He came from Penn in 1975 when he was already well known as a novelist and taught here for 10 years. And his daughter, Jamila, was born here. But shortly, when she got to about ninth grade, they moved. He got a position at the University of Massachusetts. And so she actually played with boys' teams through junior high, and then with girls' teams. She was so good, she got a scholarship to Stanford, and she led Stanford to 3 consecutive Final Fours, I believe. But there were a couple of terrible tragedies in their family. So the whole story is told in this issue of Sports Illustrated, which I think I have a copy of if somebody wants to read it. And anybody that wants to see anything about anything I've been talking about, send me an email, philwyoming@yahoo. philwyoming@yahoo. This is a woman from Colorado Springs who became the first Black homecoming queen. And this is Harriet Elizabeth Liz Bird with her husband James Bird, who was the first Black police chief in Wyoming, and maybe still is. And then he became a first Black U.S. Marshal for Wyoming. He actually came to the military base from New Jersey, I believe. This is John Griffin, the leading receiver for the Wyoming football team before he was kicked off. This is the daughter and the wife, the widow of Don Meadows of the 14. This is Jason Thompson from Cheyenne, the first Black president of the ASUW, and his daughter. And there's some quotes for you to consider. That's my last slide. Unless you want to see that first picture again. Wow. What do you think about this one? Can I read it? Moms for Liberty's spokesman, Moms for Liberty of Laramie County. This was a couple of weeks ago. She told a committee meeting hearing in support, she was speaking in support of the anti-DEI bill, arguing there was a way to teach slavery, quote, without saying it was the result of white supremacy. That's going to be tricky. And this is what State Representative C.H. Cliff Davis of Gillette said 2 days after, he's quoted, 2 days after the Black 14. He issued a statement announcing his support of the coach Eaton and the trustees. In my opinion, if the university backs up in any way on their decision, I would urge other state legislators to be very hesitant in obligating state funds to the university when we don't know if we have a university. Sound familiar? Any questions?
No, I
Yes,
wanted to mention, we have an oral history with.
And oral history was done, I guess it's been a couple of years ago now with Eleanor Steph. wish I'd known. I was a high school. But, if you know, a faculty member here named Susan McKay, who retired, she did a project, went around Wyoming interviewing a subset of women, and she interviewed Eleanor. It's transcribed if you want to see it.
Okay. Oh, yeah, she's the cowgirl up by, Labarge, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I guess I can go on for one more.
Microphone around with me. Mary Beth, do we have any questions online? Okay.
Not yet.
Anything else?
I guess I have one more, though, whenever somebody says that.
Mine's not a question. I just wanted to thank the AHC and Phil for holding this event in the current hostile climate.
I can't.
I just wanted to mention, Phil, do you remember Harry Burton saying that she would play music for Jane Ivinson,
Right.
but that after she finished, the maid would always wipe the piano keys?
Yeah, she wrote, she wrote out letters for Jane Ivinson down at the mansion, and she helped her with other stuff. She said she once got paid with a gold coin, wasn't it? And so when she came back for that reunion in 1960, she actually wrote a long article for the Boomerang called "The Lady in the Mansion," which was quite interesting.
Well, first, thanks for, what is it, book number 2?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm eager to hear about book number 3. But I wonder if, in your tracing here, your research intersected with there was a lynching in Laramie
Right.
in August of 1904. And I wonder if and the estimates of the lynch mob were between 300 and 600 people. So that was like 10% of the population of Laramie at the time, and which must have included students and faculty staff from the university. The university had been there for some time at that point. Anyway, I wonder if your research intersected with that event.
Well, only in the way that it occurred to me at some point that, in fact, it's mentioned in Kim Viner. Kim Viner wrote an article about Harry Burton in wyohistory.org, and then a larger one in the Annals of Wyoming about her. And he mentions in there that although Harry Burton herself never mentioned this, it must have been very, very disconcerting and induced a lot of fear because they only lived like a block or two away. And after this happened, the crowd went into the county jail, went up there, got the keys, took this black man out, hugging from the lamppost. And so the district judge called a grand jury. And when the grand jury was selected, he told them that anyone who participated in this or aided and abetted has committed the most horrible crime known to man. And he did that for a reason. When they started calling witnesses before the grand jury, nobody could identify anybody who was at the scene. So
was an electric light pole. There were lights. It wasn't dark.
yes,
And we had the Ku Klux Klan group at that time.
I'll let Leslie, you want to talk about
Leslie can answer.
the Ku Klux Klan real briefly?
Well, there wasn't, I mean, who knows what was really happening, but the second Ku Klux Klan made its way into Wyoming in the 1920s. So, but you know, were the remnants of the Reconstruction era Klan? I don't know, possibly.
AJ.
I just want to share, thank you, Phil, for your book, and it was really good, and thanks for mentioning me. I just want everybody here to know, when I played basketball for the University of Wyoming in 1983, in 82, my wife, at that time, I was married, Suzanne, her name was Suzanne, well, her married name was Johnson, but her maiden, I guess the nickname,
Yes.
Suzanne Barrett. And her dad was Larry Barrett, and he was the commissioner of ag. And when my kids were born, I had two boys that were born twins while I played basketball, and that was announced during the game. And my wife is, we're a racial couple, and so yeah, and so both of my boys were born. Both of them were in law enforcement in here. One is in law enforcement in the state of Colorado. The other one is practicing in Omaha, Nebraska. He's got his PhD, and so I want you to know that things have changed somewhat. They've changed, and so my kids were the recipients of good education, good instructors that cared about them, and I had good instructors. I graduated, and so I wanted you to know that.
But I wanted to say some, but there was something about the Ku Klux Klan. But slipped away. Hey, thank you for coming.